Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Again, it depends on what time you are watching or viewing this recorded lecture. So, for today, I will discuss the Democratic and Republican political parties in America. So, this topic or lesson, I have already discussed it or introduced it in our face to face class, but there is so much more, or there are a lot more information that I could actually highlight involving this lesson of ours. So let me start. So when you try to, let's say, find the relevance of understanding the Democratic and Republican political parties in America, what comes to mind first is, of course, the political ideologies and values that basically are incorporated in both of these political parties. So both the Democratic and Republican parties represent, of course, as you know, contrasting ideologies. You have watched that in the American news or the social media platforms on how the Republicans and Democrats are basically against or opposing their political ideologies. So first, as you know, the Democrats, they generally emphasize equality, social welfare, and even government intervention in the economy or free market. While Republicans prioritize what we call the limited government, also they want free markets, but they value individual responsibility. So studying these differences are very important because you guys as political scientists of the future, uh, you will basically know or understand how morality, economy, and social values guide American political behavior. Okay, so let us now understand the nature of political parties in America. So we have already discussed this uh, in our face-to-face class, but let me just go back to it. So, as mentioned by NDI, political parties are essential institutions of democracy because, again, when you speak of institutions of democracy, political parties are basically a collective representation of the people's will. Meaning, political parties are very important institutions when it comes to being the link between the government and the people, or particularly the voters, no? So when you see political parties in social media or even in telecast, you would automatically find an assumption or you will already know what particular representation they belong in. Maybe they are under the banner or political banner of Donald Trump or Kamala Harris or Barack Obama or John F. Kennedy and the other US presidents that came to be. But when it comes to being the representation of the people's will, they also help in organizing political life. When you speak of political life, this is how people correspond, how they basically practice their political behavior, may it be through voting, political support, joining campaigns, even fighting for a particular political advocacy. So these are what manifest in political life. Besides that, as you know, in the US Congress, the Democrats or the Democrats and the Republicans, they are very, let's say, opposing and at the same time dichotomous in terms of their decisions, may it be in the public sphere or international sphere of policies, no? Because again, when it comes to raising political concerns in public policies, they differ, particularly in issues like abortion, let's say same-sex equality. At the same time, when it comes to social development programs like in, let's say, um, disaster programs or let's say in finance even. So these things are areas of public policy. The Republicans and Democrats, they differ, but again, at the end of the day, these are based from where they come from or what particular community, what particular race, or let's say geographic location they belong in. Because again, when it comes to political life, people or voters of America are coming from rather than just a political reason why they voted for for the electorate that they support, no. So besides that, political parties are also existing for the purpose that they ensure that citizens are well voiced out, or they are represented in terms of their voices in the political process, you know. So, second to that, as mentioned in this bullet, so competing political parties in both national and local elections parties offer citizens a choice in governance. Importantly, while in opposition, they can hold governments accountable. So, when you speak of choice in governance, again, political parties are represented in pre-elections, mid-elections, even in post-elections, not only in America, but also if you were to compare it with the Philippines, even with UK, even in Canada. So when you speak of choice in governance, is that people are given their free will, their political free will, to basically choose what particular political party should be winning or should win and have a particular seat when it comes to decision making in their Congress or their parliament, perhaps. So, importantly, again, we go back to the point that political parties also hold governments accountable. So, what we mean by these, it already came from this term opposition. So as you know, in every elections, there are winners, there are losers, no? So in the case of America, in the 2025 political status quo, the winning or the dominating political party is the Republican Party, which is of course aligned or inclined with Donald Trump as a Republican himself. So now, since the Republican Party is dominating the U.S. Congress in their Senate or the House of Representatives, even in their even in their political campaigns in the um, uh, old media or in the new media, you would already see how the Democratic Party is basically viewing or monitoring the Republican Party, no? May it be in its policies, may it be in its behavior in the social sphere. Because again, it is the political party's responsibility to basically make sure that the people are represented, especially in the policy areas or policy decision making areas, no. So if the particular let's say victor political party does not live up to its promises, to its responsibilities to the public or the public sphere, the other political party that it's basically against or competing with could basically, let's say, put a pressure, or let's say put a hard accountability towards this victor political party. Okay, so Marsh actually have indicated or mentioned the functions of political parties. He mentioned that there are three, no? So it varies from number one, promoting the interests of their voters, because again, voters come from not only political reasons why they support their political party. It does something, or it originates a lot from their personal reasoning. Some of them, it is based they are basing from their geographical location, like if they are from Texas, of course they are represented better through the Republican Party. If they're from the state of New York, of course they would support the Democratic Party. But again, it really varies, you know. Some of them, they tend to support, or let's say be more inclined on their political interests rather than their cultural, racial, or let's say personal reasons, no? So when you speak of promoting the interests of their voters, it has something to do more on their involvement when it comes to policies and programs. Okay. So second to that, Political parties shape party programs and networking. So this is a very important consideration. Because again, when you speak of party programs, in each political parties, particularly the Democratic and Republican political parties of America, they offer or they basically market themselves in holding particular programs that they want to offer the people. And that is evident in every US elections that happen. Like, for example, in the case of Donald Trump, when he was running for president in the past election, he basically promised the American people that he would empower the economy by basically putting better free market mechanisms, at the same time by pushing more investors to basically invest towards the US stock market and many more. He also promised that he would fix the immigration issues that happen in America, particularly in the case of Asians, at the same time Latin Americans. But what you should remember is that political parties in America, they don't really function on basically having their own budget, but rather they also depend on other network of institutions, like private institutions in the business industry, in the food industry, even multinational corporations, and whatsoever. Third, political parties in relation to citizens is basically allowing the citizens or the public to participate in shaping party programs, meaning that political parties, they do consult, they do involve people on what particular issues they encounter within their respective territory or their respective state in the case of America. So for example, if the Republican Party were to involve people from Ohio, let's say Long Island, in Texas, New Hampshire, so these are Republican states that were mentioned, they would automatically, let's say, represent, or they would automatically involve the issues they encounter, may it be in the market mechanism or the social programs, and of course incorporate that on what the political party have to represent, no? And of course what they have to market during the elections. And this would basically foreshadow how the Republicans come to experience the lapses of their state government. Okay, so let's now analyze, or let's try to understand what the other political parties in America, let's say, represent, rather than just having the uh, Democratic and Republican parties as our basis for this lesson. Because again, in America, there are a lot of existing political parties besides the Democratic and Republican political parties. These are the dominating and non-dominating political parties in America. So as you can see in the major parties, we have of course the Democratic and the Republican Party with their political perspective, which is of course liberal and conservatives, or what we call the actual supporters or the members of the party. So besides that, the other major parties are the following. So we have the America First, the CPUSA, the DSA, the Green Party, the Libertarian, and the Constitutional. And of course, the minor parties are the following: the Texas, and we have the American Indian Action. So these other major parties, like the America First and the others, are still a very huge, important, or chunk of American politics and governance. Because even though they don't dominate as much as the other two political parties, is they still represent a vast major components of how the American people view, at the same time how they build their political ideology as a community or individually, no? So let us actually dissect each other political party, or each political party, as you can see here. So of course we'll start with the Democratic Party, or of course the liberals, no? So as you know, they are very advocating for social equality, At the same time, civil rights, human rights, at the same time, environmental protection, and they promote social welfare. That they are, of course, they are very inclusive in terms of race, color, at the same time, social classes. So when it comes to their policies, sa aspekto ng polisiya, they support progressive taxation, no? At the same time, healthcare access, reproductive rights, and even climate change action. Kaya pagdating sa US Congress, these are the things that they usually lobby or advocate for. So when it comes to their communities or geographical locations, as you can see, this is in the color of dark blue, or I don't know, maybe this is indigo. They are very well scattered within America. Ano, kalat na kalat talaga sila. But usually they are found in urban areas or coastal areas like California, New York, and other diverse communities. Because the liberals themselves are usually people from the minority population or the black community as even, no? So next to that, we have the Republican Party or the conservatives. So the conservatives are basically they are within the notion of emphasizing again limited government, also free markets. They also value individual liberty, but they uphold still of their traditional social values like being inclined with the church, or they're very quote unquote American centric, or they protect uh, the protection of the whites particularly, as they believe that they are the original founding fathers of America. So when it comes to policies they lobby for or they advocate for, so they believe that lower taxes are better because again, even though the liberals believe that there should be progressive taxation, is that they support higher taxation naman because they believe na mas nakakapag-contribute to sa social development or sa uh, let's say mga community programs, and that really requires a huge taxation from the people or the public. As compared to the conservatives, they believe that lower taxes are better because people could basically focus better on their individual needs or individual ano no necessities as beings. They also believe that there should be reduced regulation when it comes to economic practices such as trade, transactions, no, because they don't want too much involvement of external forces or actors like international markets and whatsoever. So Republicans also believe, or conservatives believe, that there should be gun rights or merong right ng mga Americans when it comes to owning and using their own guns per household or per individual, because they believe na pagka nagda-diversify ang race at the same time ang population ng America, that also requires a better or enhanced security among themselves. And lastly, they believe in or they support strong national defense because when it comes to maritime security, land security, even in land security, they support that national defense is uh, a key survival for America as a territory because there's a possibility of another existence of war, World War III. So meron silang sabihin nating hindi naman pagka overthinking, but also it's just a mechanized way for Republicans as individuals. And lastly, when it comes to their base or geographical locations naman, similar to the liberals, they are very well spread out in America. So they are usually found in rural areas like Texas, at the same time Long Island, even Idaho, ano pa ba, yeah, Long Island, Idaho, and some of the provincial states of America. But most of the time, dito sila sa may part ng southern, yung mga dating slave states, pati yung mga nasa mid-western states. Okay? Right, so itakal naman natin yung other non-democratic and Republican political parties like ayun nga yung America First up to the minor parties such as the American Indian Action. So let's tackle first yung America First policy. So yung mga America First policy, ay America First supporters or America First Party supporters ay tinatawag ng mga populist. So, ang pinaprioritize nila is number one, it's the American sovereignty. Kaya gusto nilang i-secure yung American sovereignty is they believe that the white Americans are basically the original or the most valued citizens of America that should be protected economically and politically. So they try to support the stricter immigration policies. They don't want the intervention of Africans at the same time yung mga nasa Latin American countries, even Asians, no? And lastly, they want economic nationalism, meaning yung mga mass produce or production nila ng mga products na nako-consume in public and private markets. They want it to be American made or sabihin nating locally made by Americans. They don't want to really depend on particular countries or allied countries when it comes to that. So pagdating naman sa polisiya or sa policies, they protect again domestic industries or local industries. They want border security similar to the Republican Party. And ayun, meron silang very important highlight of globalization because yung globalization, they think it's the main culprit or the main reason why America is downgrading economically or they're trying to let loose of their borders, which is, of course, allowing external threats to enter. May it be through security, may it be through economic aspects. So, yung mga supporter or members ng America First Party, which are the populists, they live among rural and working classes areas. So, they are often aligned or kasama sila sa mga supporters ni Trump dito sa Republican Party. Kumbaga sila yung smaller or sabihin nating narrowed version of the Republican Party. So, parang anak niya tong America First Party na to. Okay? So next to that, we have the CPUSA naman. So sila yung mga Marxist-Leninist in terms of political ideology. So yung mga taga Community Party USA or CPUSA, they advocate for areas like, of course, similar to other Marxist-Leninists, they want the abolition or the removal of capitalism, may it be in the local or international aspect. So they don't want free market mechanisms, they don't want looser trade policies, and besides that, they also believe that the establishment of what we call the socialist state is better when it comes to attaining yung tinatawag na collective ownership, which is of course a very Marxist ideology, no? So, sa may aspeto ng polisiya or ng policies, they support, of course, the welfare or the protection of workers, particularly yung mga nasa lower classes of America, no? Yung mga nasa blue-collar job margins. So, they support yung, wealth redistribution, although, sa case ng Amerika kasi, which is heavily capitalist-centric, hindi na ganun ka-possible or feasible yung pinaglalaban nilang advocacies. But still, kinakagat ito mostly ng mga nasa rural areas, particularly yung mga farmers ng Amerika. And they don't also support yung mga foreign policy that are very anti sabihin nating mga sinusupport nila yung mga anti-imperialist foreign policy, meaning they don't want to really engage with countries from Europe. They don't also want to want the US to do diplomatic missions or negotiations because they believe na parang capitalist extension of activities. So, next to that, we have the DSA or yung tinatawag na Democratic Socialist of America or mga Democratic Socialist supporters. So sila naman yung nagpo-promote ng tinatawag natin na democratic control of the economy. meaning they want to fight for labor rights or kaya mga social justice, which is very aligned with the Democratic Party or the liberals because they believe that by protecting the economy and its labor rights, social justice, is na empower yung original identity ng US as a democratic state. Besides that, when it comes to policy lobbying or policy support, they believe in universal healthcare. Sa time pa lang ni Obamacare, actually, itong DSA or Democratic Socialists of America is very well outspoken when it comes to their valued policies. No? Kaya nga itong DSA na to, it's like uh, a brainchild or sabihin nating ally ng Democratic Party. So, besides universal healthcare, they want free college education. Kaya yung mga public or mga state universities or community colleges in America, they usually do partnerships, they do collaborations with this party kasi sila yung talagang merong activist mindset when it comes to this aspect. And of course, similar to the liberals or the Democrats, they believe in higher taxation for the wealthy because they believe na yung mga wealthy people, since they have higher income, they should contribute the most when it comes to economic and national expenditure. So next to that, of course, from the color itself and the term itself of the party, we have here the Green Party or tinatawag yung mga supporters nila as the eco or the eco-socialist. So ang pinaka-ideology nila is from the term itself, eco-socialist is nasa environmentalism sila. So itong mga eco-socialist na to, they focus on the UNSDG or UN Sustainable Development Goal, particularly dun sa may area ng sustainability, at the same time yung sa social justice. Then they also support yung mga grassroots democracy and of course non-violence. The Green Party is also involved with the Democratic Party. So ally ano sila no, ally political party rin sila ng Democratic Socialists of America. So nakikita niyo yung alignment no or nakikita niyo yung involvement of the political parties with each other. But at the end of the day, yung bigger umbrella nila will always be coming from the Democratic Party, no? So when it comes to policy involvement, yung mga eco-socialists or yung nasa Green Party, they believe that climate action is a huge priority given that America is experiencing a lot of climate change aftermaths or consequences. Pero again, pagdating sa climate action kasi, this is the one of the least priority kasi ni Donald Trump. He isn't so much of a very climate-oriented individual. Also, the eco-socialists believe in renewable energy, which is, of course, largely not practiced or utilized by American corporations kasi maraming mga corporations in America who practice a lot of greenhouse gas emissions or sabihin nating huge waste disposal sa mga bodies of water or even in the land mass that they have. So, next to that, we have the Libertarian Party or the Libertarians na tinatawag. So, ito yan, yung color yellow. So, usually, dito sila sa may side na to, ano? So, yung mga Libertarians, when they are advocate for what we call the individual freedom or from the term itself, liberty. So, they want minimal state interference. Pag sinabi nating minimal state interference is they do support free markets or intervention ng state sa market, pero it should be regulated or minimized because if the government shall control the national market is hindi na siya magkakaroon ng sabihin nating freedom when it comes to choosing its ally market states. Besides that, the libertarians believe in civil liberties, particularly in the freedom to express, at the same time freedom to political expression. And believe it or not, the libertarians, they also support owning guns or gun rights, similar to the America First or the America First Party supporters, because the libertarians believe that people tend to have the consequence to over practice their liberties. And with that, uh, it can be a consequence na maging utilized for crime or sabihin nating attack to one community yung maging consequence nitong over practice of liberty and freedom na to. So people should protect or should be able to protect themselves. And lastly, the libertarians also believe in non-interventionist foreign policies, meaning they don't want the intervention of external actors or countries at hand. So next to that, last one for the major parties, we have the constitutional party or tinatawag na uh, Christian nationalism or Christian nationalist believers. So sila yung mga from the term itself very inclined in the Christian values, no? So they emphasize on biblical principles, particularly in the aspect of right to life. At the same time, their belief towards the role of the state in protecting the welfare of the people, but it should be always be based on the belief of God or this protection of God. So, itong mga taga-constitutional party na to, they value family values. So, they think that Americans should always serve or give importance to their family members, even politicians themselves, because at the end of the day, this is what resonates within the Christian faith. And when it comes to their policy obligations, very straightforward. They don't like abortion or they're against abortion because against yun yung naka-indicate sa Christian Bible. They don't like same-sex marriage, no? As opposing to the Democratic Party and the Democratic Socialist. So, besides that, they support Christian moral laws in governance or the intervention of the church in the state decisions. So, they're not supportive of what we call the secularization or secularism. And let's now go to the minor parties such as the Texas Party and the American Indian Action Party. So, yung Texas Party na tinatawag from the term itself, Texas, so their supporters are called the centrists. So, dito sila located sa pinaka-gitna. No? So, yung mga centrists na tinatawag, they're actually very supportive of the Republican Party. So, itong Texas centrist, itong Constitutional Party, mga aligned yan with Republican Party. So, when Donald Trump won for presidential election, mga hakot yan ng Republican Party, yung Texas centrist pati Constitutional Party. So, yung Texas Party na to, they are considered to be part of the minor parties kasi from their population itself, it really speaks a lot. Sobrang konti lang nila. So, centered sila sa state of Texas. So, focused sila dun sa beliefs of local autonomy or the empowering of the state power or the state mechanism. So, they also believe in moderate politics or they don't want the over-intervention of the national government. So, they want to have their own individual or independent state decisions. So, besides that, the Texas Party also believed in empowering the Texan identity. So, always prioritizing the conservative ideologies of Texan people. So, that is a very important component of how they protect their individual liberty as a political party. Okay, so when it comes to their policies naman, ang mga centrist or mga taga-Texas Party, they balance yung tinatawag na conservative and liberal policies, no? Meaning they don't want to over-focus on being conservatives kasi naniniwala sila na yung economy or yung state economy still really depends on other states, on their other neighboring states. Kasi itong si Texas itself, it's a very dry country. They don't really are exposed in the bodies of water. At the same time, tinatawag silang landlocked state. So, next to that, we have the American Indian Action or yung tinatawag na AIA party. So, as indicated in the map, maliit lang din sila by population. They're mostly on this area. So, kalat-kalat din sila. But at the end of the day, when it comes to voter participation or voter number, ay konti lang sila. So, yung American Indian Action Party or AIA party is, of course, they have supporters as called as the indigenous rights supporters. So they advocate for, of course, native sovereignty, or they believe that the Native Americans are the main reason why America is existing as it is, no? So from our past lecture or first lecture in AMGov, as you know, underrepresented naman talaga ang mga Indians or American Indians, because when it comes to their adherence to the Constitution of America, they aren't so much of prioritized, lalo nung early 1700s pati 1800s. So recently lang din nagkaroon ng support when it comes to the American Indians or the Native Americans. So besides that, the indigenous rights supporters of the AIA party, they also believe in land rights, similar to how the Don sisters, Mary and Carrie Don, protected the Western Shoshone territories. So cultural preservation, meaning they want to pass down yung mga practices and norms nila from the American Indian community to the present generation of Americans, kasi slowly na weaken na yan at the present, being replaced by a lot of modernist practices. And lastly, self-determination, because they believe that being an American Indian really requires a lot of valuing of how they were as American Indians versus dun sa modern American. So, they want to protect that self-identity that they had as American Indians. So, pagdating naman sa policy, or sa policy, they promote yung tinatawag na federal recognition in ways that they want to be recognized equally as Americans. No, they don't want to be seen just as Native Americans, but as a solid equal American citizen. So next to that, yung restitution, meaning yung pagdi-distribute or pagbibigay ng mga land ownership dun sa mga Native Americans who had their generations of families who lived there, particularly yung Western Shoshone Territory and some of the rural states in America like Texas, at the same time yung Long Island. And of course, very important yung indigenous governance, or yung sabihin nating independent governance ng mga Native Americans on their tribal councils, as we call it. Okay, so at present, spread out sila sa America, but most of the time nasa sila, no? Nasa counties sila, as like Alaska, Dakota, even some parts of the Southwest. Okay? So since we have discussed the political parties in America, let us now actually dissect naman yung mga social and economic factors of voter decisions in America. So as you can see here, na-discuss ko na rin to in our face-to-face class. Hinati ko siya into economic and social factors. So ito yung mga reasons, factors why voters of America tend to find a reason on supporting their political party. So may it be Democratic, Republican, or some of the other political parties we have uncovered earlier. So these are the major considerations that are of. So, sa economic factors muna tayo. So, as you can see here, Americans measure political support based on favorable economic policies by the candidate. So, number one, we have the business or trade policies, which is again the number one priority of Republicans, and particularly the President Donald Trump himself, because he himself is a very trade and business oriented individual. And what comes to that is, of course, sabihin natin, restrictive trade and business policies, or limiting their intervention with other countries or interference with other countries, but rather they just want to focus on what's most beneficial for their economy. So that would be selecting the most beneficial state partners. So next to that, governmental power to shield consumers and laborers. So at present, dyan nagkakaroon ng issue yung Amerika because many of the consumers of America, lalo dun sa mga public and private market, they're basically seeing the evident existence of inflation, particularly dun sa mga raw goods, at the same time sa mga goods nila that are used for daily consumption. So, si Trump, he is trying his, sabihin nating best in securing the welfare of the consumers by basically sabihin nating imposing higher tariffs towards their partner countries on trade. So, that might be a very huge disadvantage for external markets or other countries like Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, at the same time the Philippines, even with Peru, at the same time Mexico. But on the end of the national welfare of America, it is beneficial for them to impose higher tariffs. Besides that, the economic factors also resonate with the eradicating market risk of monopolies or monopolies. So in the administration of Trump, he is a huge supporter of monopolies, no? So he believed that markets like Costco, even sabihin nating mga public market uh, businesses in America, they are usually supported or they are usually sabihin nating empowered because Trump believed that Americans should only depend on their own original or sabihin nating native markets rather than depending on other countries. Kaya nga siya restrictive when it comes to doing trade and business with other countries, ano? So next to that, protection from shoddy consumer products and environmental degradation. So at this time, iniiwasan ni Trump yung existence of poor quality products that are usually coming from China, even from Taiwan, kasi he believes that this low quality uh, products would disintegrate or weaken the market mechanism of America. Kaya right now, nagle-lessen sila ng mga products that are not FDA approved or sabihin nating mga regulatory or quality assurance approved kasi they want to really make sure na whatever comes in the American market are of course beneficial or sabihin nating good quality for the American people. But again, since they are trying to empower their national or local American standard production, nagkakaroon ng environmental degradation issue. So yung mga provinces or states in America that are where the um, where the factories or the production areas are located, nagkakaroon sila ng issue when it comes to their exposing or disposing rather of waste materials, which is of course affecting their reliability as a very known environmental concern country or state. So when it comes to the social factors, so these are the five things that are uh, seen as very important for Americans, lalo sa pagpili ng political party, no? So number one would be race and gender. Next would be abortion, religious involvement, cultural issues, and discrimination. So as you know, these are social issues or factors that are mostly supported by the Democratic Party or the Liberals. Even dito sa na-mention natin na ano no, na Libertarians, the Green Party, even yung even yung American Indian Action. So, itong mga areas na to, social factors na to, hindi sila masyadong nai-empower or nabibigyan ng consideration ng mga Republicans because again, they want to focus more on economic factors. Okay? So, moving forward, ito yung figure that I let you guys analyze during our face-to-face class. So, this is about the voter distribution in the US at the election of 1980. So, ano ba yung point why you guys needed to analyze this particular figure? Because it really shows how, again, going back to this social and economic factors of voter decision in America, is how Reagan versus Carter, which are, of course, different or opposing when it comes to their political ideologies, as Reagan is a Republican and Carter is a Democrat. So makikita nyo dyan yung tinatawag natin na horizontal axis, which is this part, or yung tinatawag nating economic factor loadings, versus the vertical axis, which is the social factor loadings. So yun yung naghahati or nagpapakita ng distinction or ng differences between Carter and Reagan, no? So, itong mga dots na to, they represent the voter behavior or the voters in America. So, sa may horizontal axis muna tayo pumunta or sa economic factor loadings. So, given that, as you know, Reagan is more on the Republican side, mas nag-lean siya towards the economic factor loading. Because again, Republicans tend to overemphasize, they tend to focus on economic benefits rather than social developments. So sa may economic factor loadings, it represents the voters' positions on economic issues, particularly dun sa punta muna tayo sa may sa may left side or dun sa may negative values. So sa may negative values, they support government intervention, welfare, and redistribution. So yun yung liberal economic view na tinatawag. Okay? So yung mga economic liberals na tinatawag. On the other hand, yung sa may right side naman, these are the positive values, meaning yun yung free markets, lower taxes, pati yung tinatawag na limited government. So yun yung conservative economic views na tinatawag. Okay? On the other hand, punta naman tayo sa may vertical axis or yung social factor loadings. So sa may part na to, nahati yan sa social and cultural issues na nagiging consideration ng mga liberals in supporting Carter. So punta muna tayo sa may upper side na part. So sa may upper side na part, yun yung tinatawag na positive value. So yung mga social liberals na tinatawag. So yung mga social liberals, they support civil rights, gender equality, or yung tinatawag na secularism. On the other hand, yung sa may lower side naman, yun yung mga negative values. So yung tinatawag na negative values, dyan naman inclined yung mga social conservative. So yung mga social conservative, they are lenient or they are more supporting of traditional family values, religion, pati yung social order. So, i-compare natin yung position ng dalawang candidates na to. Jimmy Carter as Democrat and Ronald Reagan as Republican. So, si Jimmy Carter, as you can see, andito siya sa may quadrant na to. So, si Jimmy Carter is positioned toward the upper left quadrant, as you can see. So, mas nagre-reflect siya ng tinatawag na position of being a social liberal. Or, in his case, since malapit na siya sa may middle quadrant, nag-aano siya, nagsusupport siya ng tinatawag na moderate economic intervention. So, this is a very typical democratic platform in terms of political belief. Okay, on the other hand, may tinatawag na naman, on the side of Ronald Reagan, located siya sa may lower right quadrant. So sa may lower right quadrant, as you can see dito siya, as a Republican himself, he symbolizes yung tinatawag na social conservatism. Yung social conservatism, again, it reflects yung pagiging supportive sa family values, at the same time yung importance ng intervention ng church sa state decision, pati yung sa may social order. So yung nire-reflect ni Reagan as a Republican is more of social conservatism and free market economic policies, which is of course defining of the Republican ideology. So punta tayo sa may aspeto ng voter distribution. or yung uh, behavior ng mga voters when it comes to Reagan pati Carter. So since nakita na natin yung pagiging inclined nung dalawa on a very different perspective as Carter being a social liberal and at the same time moderate economic interventionist, or si Ronald Reagan being a social conservatist at the same time a free market economic supporter. So dito sa may voter distribution naman, meron nire-represent na ano yan, no, na individual voter decision yung mga circles na yan. So yung clustering of points near the center, so you can see mas marami yung mga voters dyan. Nagsasuggest yan na many Americans of the 1980s were held moderate or meron silang mixed views towards the two quadrants of being a social supportive or an economic supportive. And with that, with the mixed views that is represented in this figure, they don't have a strong alignment with neither the extremes. May it be too much of a being socially supportive or economically supportive nga. However, meron tayong makikitang visible tilt dito sa may part ng cleavage. Yung cleavage, yun yung line na yan. So yung cleavage line na yan, the dashed diagonal as you can see here, shows a very important division trend. Meaning, yung mga voters were beginning to align more consistently dun sa side ni Reagan. No? Mas maraming supportive sa side ni Reagan on this part. So, with that, since the conservatives have more evident voter behavior in the time or on the side of Reagan and less on the side of Carter, it really shows the interpretation or a good political interpretation of the 1980 elections. So, the 1980 elections, it basically marked a very important major ideological realignment in US politics, no? Because yung naging victory ni Reagan at this time, it indicated that a significant number of voters had shifted rightward, no? So it favored, or the voters favored, economic deregulation, at the same time yung traditional social values that Reagan supported. Okay? Besides that, si Carter naman, he supported a strong or a stronger social liberal and economic moderate perspective. But he lost traction or nawalan siya ng control or ng suporta sa mga social class or mga working class na naging frustrated with the economic stagnation of this time. Kasi nung struggle nila from the 1970s, which of course resulted to a lot of economic downgrading in the US, it really showed how Reagan's economic policies and economic support was more of needed by the American people rather than Carter's social supportive policies. So, yung pinaka-take away or yung lesson natin dito sa naging naging figure na to, is it basically shows yung tinatawag na ideological polarization between the Republicans and the Democrats. So, yung pinapakita ng figure na to, it shows the early stages of clear or indicative left-right divide that would later define yung American politics on how Democrats and Republicans would come to be even in the present. So, yung Ronald Reagan coalition, na-emerge siya or nagkaroon siya ng emergence. Nagkaroon ng voters with conservative economic and social views that have clustered towards Reagan's quadrant nga, as you can see here. So, besides that, yung mga centrists were still numerous or marami pa rin yung mga moderate supporters that were still in between of the social and economic factor loadings. And when it comes to economic issues naman, as you can see, as going back here, the horizontal or the economic factor loadings, it appears to explain variance in voter positions, showing that economic concerns were the primary concern or priority of the dividing in the 1980 election. So moving forward, so let's now go back to the dominance of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party of America. So if you were to ask who are the two dominating political parties in America, we already answered that. So those are the or these are the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. But as you can see in this slide, meron silang nire-represent na political logo. So, number one, it would be the Republican elephant. So, sorry, I would like to correct myself kasi nung face-to-face class, ang na-mention kong Democratic Party logo is yung elephant. Tapos yung Republican Party is yung donkey naman. Sorry, I got messed up or nalito ako, no? But as you can see in this slide, yung Republican elephant, of course, it is the political symbol or the political logo of the conservatives. So, on the other hand, we have the Democratic donkey, which is the symbol of the people of liberals or the liberalism. So let me show you a particular video or short video that shows the history of the Republican Party and Democratic Party in terms of their political logos. So please watch and take note from this video.
Both U.S. political parties have an animal symbol, a donkey for Democrats and an elephant for Republicans, and they plaster the symbols everywhere, on hats, pins, t-shirts, and mugs. But how did that come to be? The donkey symbol dates to Andrew Jackson's presidential campaign in 1828. Jackson's opponents labeled him a jackass, another name for donkey. But Jackson had the last laugh. He incorporated donkeys on his campaign posters and won. Political cartoonists perpetuated the link between Democrats and donkeys. The most famous was Thomas Nast, known as the father of the American cartoon. He is also credited for popularizing the Republican elephant. His satirical drawings appeared in Harper's Weekly in the 1870s, but the Republican elephant appeared much earlier in the pro-Lincoln campaign newspaper Father Abraham. An elephant is holding up a banner celebrating Union military victories. It's a play on the expression seeing the elephant, which soldiers used during the Civil War, meaning engaging in combat. Republicans' embrace of the elephant has only grown stronger over time. President Gerald Ford and his wife Betty had an elephant room in their California home. In 1984, President Ronald Reagan was given a baby elephant by the President of Sri Lanka. Today, Republicans claim the elephant as the party's official symbol.
Okay, so based from this video from so we have watched the video or clip that shows the history of the Republican Party and Democratic Party political symbols or logos, such as the Republican elephant and the Democratic donkey. So again, we go back to the reality that the Republican Party at first sight, it appears to be it's a political cartoon that was again produced or drawn by Thomas Nast, who is basically a political cartoonist at that time. So it became a very known popular magazine image, and it also have um, let's say, lured the voters in choosing the conservatives or the Republican Party as a very good decision of voting, as because as you know the Republican electorate or the elephant itself, it represents the large, at the same time strong, powerful, but sometimes easily frightened by rumors type of species. So with that, that type of characteristic it served as a political narrative or a political representation for the Republicans. Over time, this symbol or the Republican elephant, it stuck or became the representative of the Republican Party's values and principles. Today, it's associated with, again, conservatism, as elephants are, because they are conservative and very territorial. So they believe in limited government, at the same time, free market policies, and even individual sovereignty. As compared to the donkey, which is a more, let's say, slimmer or smaller animal, it's a symbol of the people and liberalism. So, as mentioned in the video, it goes back even earlier in the 1828 presidential campaign of Andrew Jackson, which we will tackle later on. So, Andrew Jackson is a very known Democrat. Basically, Jackson's opponents called him Jackass, as mentioned in the clip, because of his populist and anti-elitist views. But instead of rejecting or removing that, let's say, insult or criticism towards him, he embraced the symbol. Kaya nga yung donkey, it is criticized by many as a very stubborn and a very difficult type of animal. He used the donkey to represent, or Jackson used the donkey to represent his stubborn determination to push for the demarcation of liberalism in America. So later on, si Thomas Nast, as a political cartoonist, he used the donkey in his political cartoons in 1870s to represent the Democratic Party. No? It cemented as an enduring symbol. Okay? So ang nire-represent niyang values, it's of course the liberal and populist values. It shows how ordinary citizens, just like how donkeys are ordinary, are still very embracing of social welfare and even egalitarian principles. Okay? So besides that, yung characteristics of humility, which is still incorporated as a donkey, or being the service to the people, are still manifested. No? It contrasts yung behavior ng elephant na very mighty, very authority-driven, that is of course showing in the Republican Party's ideologies. So let's now move forward to the distinction or the comparison between the
Both U.S. political parties have
Republican and political parties. No? So as you can see in this picture or illustration by BBC UK, I'm sorry that it's low on quality. So ito yung mga, let's say, assigned or defined characteristics of the Republicans versus the Democrats. But again, class, these characteristics, they don't really fully represent the whole characteristics of Republicans and Democrats, because again, the option or the choice of voters or American people in uh, choosing what political party they want to support, it really varies. No, it's not something that is a one size fits all or a one factor fits all type of thing. It could be derived from their political, social, personal, or historical or familial factors or reasons. But again, these are just based on BBC UK's, I think, own interpretation and research about the two political party supporters. So number one, of course, we have the Republicans, which are of course called as conservatives, comparing with the Democrats who are liberals. So when it comes to military spending, ang belief ng mga Republicans is there should be higher increases in military spending because they think that national security is the number one priority, or it should be the most prioritized, because there could be a possibility of national threats like wars, at the same time, let's say, terrorist attacks like just what happened in the 9/11 attack by the Al-Qaeda or the ISIS, versus the Democrats or the liberals, that they believe that there should be lower increases in military spending. It's not that the state should not prioritize national security, but rather there are other areas of priority of policies and programs that should be given equal opportunities to. Next to that, the Republicans oppose gun control laws, meaning they want Republicans, Americans to own their own guns because they believe that national threats, at the same time, the evident spreading of races and beliefs and political ideologies in America is evidently increasing day by day. And with that, the practice of being violent at the same time being volatile is more possible, at the same time more increasing every day in America. And with that, people, particularly Americans, should be able to protect themselves if these things happen. No? On the other hand, si Democrats naman or liberals, they believe that there should be more gun control laws because they believe that people tend to over abuse or abuse in a simplest manner the use of guns. So maraming mga Republicans particularly who tend to use guns for sabihin natin non-protectionist or non-important reasons like giving threats to other races of people of color like Asians, even Black Americans, and they're not supportive of this because this really leads to a very violent behavior towards people within each other, no? So next to that, the Republicans are anti-abortion because they believe in the they believe in the values embedded by the church or by the Bible. That of course abortion is against the word of God or the command of God because killing one individual who isn't born is against the sacrilegious values. On the other hand, the Democrats are pro-choice, or they believe that abortion is a right, or it's a civil right, or a human right that should be empowered, meaning pharmaceutical companies, hospitals should strengthen their institutionalization of abortion. Okay? Ah. So next to that, so Republicans, they mainly oppose gay marriage because again, going back to their conservative or biblical beliefs, they believe that men should be just married with a woman or the opposite sex because it is unethical for two gender, same sex gender to be married with each other as compared to Democrats who support gay marriage, no? So in many Democrat states like California, even in New York, they actually have legalized same-sex marriages, which leads to many people going there and having their marriage there as compared to their country who are against it. So next to that, Republicans believe that there should be less tax for the wealthy because in a Republican state or in a sabihin natin American state, there should always be equal distribution of monetary or fiscal distribution within the people. And that itself shows that everyone has a role to fill in and that should be equally distributed or assigned. As compared to the Democrats, they believe that higher taxes for higher incomes or wealthy people should be imposed because not all people, not all Americans have equal wages, equal incomes, and with that, people with higher money or fiscal capacity or financial capacity should contribute more to the state expenses. Next to that, so Republicans support or they have less support pala for immigration. So meaning people coming from different territories, different countries, they don't like that because this really shows na yung opportunities for America are being distributed as well for these immigrants and not focused on the quote-unquote original Americans or the whites. As compared to the Democrats that they believe that there should be greater support for immigration because America as the land of the free should constitutionally allow immigrants to stay there or create a life there because they have contributed to America's history as it is, no? Na hindi lang naman white Americans yung nag-establish ng civil rights at the same time ng freedom to autonomy, freedom to express. So these are all manifestations of people who came from different races as well. So, America owes a lot sa mga immigrants. Okay? And lastly, the Republicans disagree with climate change, similar to what Donald Trump believes in, because they believe, Trump believes that climate change is like a Western or a too much of a liberalized ideology lang, na parang the Earth will basically regenerate, will be reborn, even if it's too fucked up already or too downgraded already. And the idea that Republicans instill is that the climate change or the ecology related advocacies are just extensions of what Democrats are trying to instill in the policy arena. So the Democrats believe in climate change. As you know, many Democrats are involved in activist um, movements in where, or social movements in where they try to address or try to call out the government, so particularly Trump, about the segregation or the ineffective waste management of America, no? So moving forward, let's now go to the historical developments of the Democratic Party. So what you have to understand about the developments of the Democratic Party of America is it wasn't a smooth sailing from the start, no? Because as you know, the founding fathers of America, like we have discussed in the past, like of course involving George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, and the others, they were all, of course, white supremacists. Let's not sugarcoat or let's not contour that reality. That even in the start of American independence, the blacks, or of course the minority, weren't so much of prioritized even back then. But what you should remember again is that in the early stages of um, democracy or democratization in America, or the liberals themselves, they weren't so much of embracing of the minorities like the black people or other races or yung mga social development programs. As compared to the Republicans na opposite naman, sila naman yung embracing of the other races and sila yung mas may priority over social development programs. So it's very different or opposite of how the Democratic Party and Republican Party as they are now, no? Na nag-evolve na yung ideology nila or yung political biases. So if I were to ask you the question, what do you think are the important developments of Democratic Party in America? We could actually base it on a series of events. At the same time, individuals in the political sphere of Democratic Party in America. So what I've done, or what I did, is I organized the developments of Democratic Party in America into 6 phases para makita niyo yung organized developments niya and changes niya throughout the years or the periods. Okay, so as you can see here, it's very detailed. Year detailed at the same time. It's showing from the earliest stage of 1790s up to the 1990 or present time. So let us first start with Jefferson and Madison. So from the periods of 1790 to 1828, dito nagkaroon ng emergence of a very important part of how the roots of Democratic Party emerged. So sino ba si Jefferson pati si Madison? So si Thomas Jefferson pati si James Madison, they have actually formed the Democratic Party in the 1790s. Or yung unang tinawag dyan ay Democratic Republican Party in the 1790s. So si Jefferson, technically, is he had a presidential election that basically marked, or it showed the first emergence of the Democratic Party in America. So that happened in 1800s. So yung naging ano nila, no, opposing mechanism nila at this time was to go against the Federalists, kasi mga Federalists are basically the ones who are, let's say, um, mas ano sila, no, mas championing or representing sila ng agrarianism, state rights, and even limited federal government. As mentioned, iba yung perspektiba kasi ng mga Democrats in the 1790s up to the 1800s. Kumbaga, sila yung mas nagmamanifest or nagpapakita ng Republican ideology. Tapos yung mga ano naman, Republican or yung mga Federalist naman, sila yung mga more of embracing ng mga democratic ideologies. So, magkakaroon ng ano yan, no, ng changes in the next phases here. Pero during this period, as mentioned, ang founders nga or yung emergent individuals nga ay sila Madison pati si Jefferson. So, ang naging opposing mechanism nila is against nga the Federalists, particularly si Alexander Hamilton. So, si Alexander Hamilton, going back, siya yung isa sa mga founding fathers of America who used the Federalist Papers to question the authenticity or the strengthening of democracy in America at that time. So, yung naging core beliefs nila Jefferson and Madison was to, again, ayun nga, yung state rights, limited federal government, and agrarian-based economy. So, sila, ano no, sila Madison and Jefferson, they wanted to protect individual liberties. At the same time, they wanted to resist what they viewed as elite, which is yung centralized power ng America at that time. So the historical context is the party represented or the Democratic Republican Party represented the early American South and the rural population. So dinepensahan nila yung mga ano no, dinepensahan nila yung mga farmers against urban industrial interest or sabihin natin yung practice ng ano no, yung practice ng uh, what do you call that? Yung land ownership and of course how it exploited the people when it comes to being slaves and whatsoever. So, this particular period, it laid the ideological foundation na tinatawag natin na popular sovereignty, which is, of course, the government by the people, which later evolved into Democratic Party. So, what you should remember again during this time is, uh, even though they quoted or named themselves a Democratic Party, is hindi pa rin sila nga ganong ka-embracing or itong type of democracy that was instilled in this period of Jefferson and Madison, it wasn't so inclusive pa at that time. But rather, it was just embracing of eradicating the central government and elite type of government. Okay? So next to that, we have Andrew Jackson from 1828 to 1850. So si Andrew Jackson naman, he was uh, the seventh president of America. So, tung period na to, the 1828 to 1850, it was considered to be the birth of the modern Democratic Party. Kasi itong Jefferson and Madison na Democratic Party, it was still embracing a lot of Republican ideologies or conservative ideologies na hindi ganun ka-inclusive. So si Andrew Jackson naman, during his time, nagkaroon siya ng particular development of democracy by basically creating the concept of what we call the common man. So, ang pinaka-point nitong common man concept na to, or Andrew Jackson even called himself the common man, is ina-emphasize niya yung popular democracy and limited government. Meaning, each individual, each American is basically a product or basically an individual that is being controlled or being, sabihin natin, led by the government. And that common man, he basically struggled his way up in the political and social arena of America. So, yung time ni Andrew Jackson, he had democratic policies including opposition to the national bank and business sectors who were seen as the culprits of the American society because they would intervene in the state decisions. At the same time, they would exploit those working class. Okay? So, yung common man is an idea. It's a movement. Not only an identity that focuses on being a working class, but rather it symbolizes how the elite system was basically a huge hindrance of how democracy should be practiced in America. So si Andrew Jackson, he is the president who established again the modern Democratic Party. So in the 1840s and 1850s, so the issue of slavery began to divide the Democratic Party. So the period of Jackson, it really embarks how slavery should be handled by the Democratic Party. Should it be embraced, or should it be eradicated or non-supported by the Democratic Party? So ang naging naging sabihin nating contribution ni Andrew Jackson, besides establishing the concept of common man, is how he defined or quoted the Jacksonian democracy. So, ang pinaka naging point ng Jacksonian democracy was to expand the voting rights to all white men. Take note, white men lang. Not just the property owners or the landowners, but also it strengthened mass participation. So, si Jackson himself, he wasn't so much of an inclusive individual. Or hindi siya, sabihin nating supportive of having the black people or the people of color to have a political participation. So kahit sabihin natin na yung birth of modern Democratic Party itong kay Jackson, it wasn't so much of how the modern Democratic Party in the present is very comparable to his Democratic Party of his term or his time. So, ano ba naging ideals or naging advocacies ni Jackson? So, he advocated for majority rule as a concept, at the same time yung populism, and ayun nga, yung opposition dun sa mga democratic national banks that were persistent at that time. Because they were basically interrogating, they were basically injecting themselves in the national government decisions, which were basically against the welfare of the working class at that time. So, besides that, ang naging ang naging parang supporter base ni Andrew Jackson were the people coming from the farming sector who are against sabihin natin against the existence of overcapitalism in America, because now overpower kasi ng banking sector yung agriculture sector at this time. At the same time, yung mga working class citizens, no? So yung mga blue collar job workers, ay ito yung mga naging target supporter ni Andrew Jackson. So kahit sabihin natin merong flaws yung democracy ni Andrew Jackson, what we should take note is ibang era or period ito. We cannot really criticize Jackson for being, sabihin natin, non-inclusive or non-black supportive, because again, the period or the political ideology, the economic climate of America was very different at that time as compared to it is now. Okay? Yeah, we cannot really say that Jackson is racist or he was against or sabi discriminating of blacks, because again, ito nga yung point ng development of Democratic Party. How it changed throughout the different events, the different administrations of different presidents in America. Okay? So next to that, we have the Civil War and Reconstruction, which happened in 1860 to 1900. So it was a period of 40 years in total. So ito yung tinatawag na period of division and decline naman. So dito na nagkaroon ng tinatawag na division between the North and Southern people, particularly in the area of slavery or black slavery. So going back to Jackson, diba, if we recall, he wasn't so much of supportive of freeing the blacks or ending slavery in the southern states. But rather, he would still see the blacks as someone who is or who are very utilized in the economic aspect of America. At the same time, America at that time wasn't economically stable. That's why he saw the blacks as a key solution to lessening government expenses, capitalist expenses, and whatsoever. So during the time of the Civil War, or the American Civil War and Reconstruction, nagkaroon ng divide over the Democratic Party, particularly sa aspeto nga ng slavery. So yung mga Northern Democrats, they opposed slavery or black slavery. Tapos yung mga Southern Democrats naman, they defended it. Okay? So yung mga nasa South na part, they were actually the ones na merong most involvement when it comes to agrarian practices. So sila yung mga landowners, sila yung mga feudal lords who would, let's say, utilize on or maximize on black people when it comes to labor expenses or labor progress. So after the Civil War, the Democratic Party became associated with what we call the former Confederacy or the white supremacy in the South. So during the Reconstruction naman, after the Civil War, the Democrats opposed Republican-led efforts to grant rights to freed American or African Americans. So at this time, nung Civil War and Reconstruction, as mentioned, hindi pa rin supportive yung mga Democrats in freeing the Africans or the black Africans from being slaves. Kasi yung mga Republicans at that time, they were supportive of it. So, at this time, we have what we call or nagkaroon ng tinatawag na the Union. So, the Union, also known as the North, ito yung nanalo in the American Civil War. So, which resulted to the victory of President Abraham Lincoln. So, si Lincoln was basically a Republican who actually freed or he believed in the equal rights should be embedded with the black people rather than just focusing on the white people. So, nung nanalo tong mga taga North, particularly through the Union, nagkaroon na ng parang clear insight yung mga Americans about how slavery was a very exploiting at the same time non-humanitarian practice. But rather, it was a realization that they had to uncover na there could be other means or other ways for their economy to not go down, basically by using technology, by using steam technology, or let's say using technology as a mean into production. So doon na sila nagkaroon ng insight on how to not exploit the black Americans, no? So moving forward, let's now go to the progressive and New Deal period. So, hatiyan into two. We have the 1913 to 21 and the 1929. So, yung 1913 to 1921, or I would say, sige, iyan na natin siya, hatiin natin siya sa different area. So, tung era na to, it was called as the rise of liberal reform. Kumbaga, nagkaroon siya ng different areas. As you can see sa Great Depression, it happened in 1929 or it could be 1930 depending on what perspective you are listening on. So nagkaroon din tinatawag na progressive era na 1900s to 1919. So start muna tayo sa progressive era. So sa progressive era, it was the period in where Woodrow Wilson leading the Democrats happened. So yung naging ni Woodrow Wilson, knowing that he was the one who established the League of Nations, nagkaroon siya ng support on reform, antitrust laws, pati social justice. Tapos, though racial segregation persisted pa rin during the time of Woodrow Wilson, mas naging clearer na for Americans yung idea or concept ng social justice pati equality during this time. Besides that, after the progressive era of Woodrow Wilson, so nagkaroon naman ng Great Depression na tinatawag of the 1930s or the 1929. So this time si Franklin Roosevelt naman yung namuno, or Franklin D. Roosevelt naman yung namuno through his particular program na tinatawag na New Deal. So yung mga Democrats, they launched the New Deal program. it expanded yung federal power to fight poverty and unemployment at this time. So they basically opposed, they fought for the economic impacts ng Great Depression by basically colliding or empowering the private and public institutions or creating partnerships between different industries with the help of the government or the funding of the government. So in the New Deal period or the New Deal program, it has led to what we call the New Deal coalition naman. Kumbaga parang ito yung grupo, a union that was established by the New Deal period. Ang nangyari dito is nagkaroon ng unity yung mga farmers, yung mga laborers, yung mga African Americans, even yung mga urban immigrants. Tapos nagkaroon sila ng powerful voice in creating a powerful voting bloc. Kumbaga dito talaga nagkaroon ng well representation yung mga minorities during the time of Franklin Roosevelt. So, with the unity of the African Americans, workers, farmers, nagbigay siya ng ibang label, ng ibang kulay sa Democratic Party. Na dati, supportive of the slavery, na dati, mas focus lang sa uh, eradication of private and banking industry, ngayon meron na siyang social inclusion of the minority. At nangyari lang yan in the Progressive and New Deal period. So, what has the Progressive and New Deal period has instilled? So, nagkaroon siya ng transformation in the party of active government, at the same time yun yung involvement ng minorities, at the same time participation, even better economic reform for agricultural areas, and even social welfare for the workers or yung mga na-exploit na workers of the industries. Next to that, we have the civil rights and party realignment. So, this was the period na nagkaroon ng relevancy JFK o si John F. Kennedy, no? So, during this time, nagkaroon ng key developments in civil rights movement. So, na-implement dyan yung tinatawag na Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So, magkasunod yan. Si Civil Rights Act, sobrang laking naging impact nito sa American society and economy because what happened in this time, it gave the right to black people, even other races, to have a voting right in the American political system and landscape. So, during this time, nagkaroon ng democratic empowerment sila Harry Truman, again with John F. Kennedy, even with Lyndon Johnson, na sila yung nagkaroon ng contribution when it comes to civil rights legislation, which of course promulgated or institutionalized nga yung Civil Rights Act of 1964. Tapos, yung Voting Rights Act naman, it also further institutionalized yung representation ng American citizens when it comes to voting or right to suffrage. Because not only were the black people given the right to vote, but also it dismantled yung whole practice of slavery at the same time yung sabihin natin racial segregation in America. So that was manifested in the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So, besides that, balik tayo dun sa may Southern realignment. So, at this time, the Civil Rights and Party realignment period, many white Southern Democrats or tinatawag dati na Dixiecrats left the party in opposition of civil rights, no? Shifting to the Republican Party. So, during this time, yung mga dating conservatives or sabihin nating mga Democrats na conservatives who are supportive of the slavery, they shifted in joining the Republican Party. So, at this time, mas naging inclusive, mas naging minority, sabihin natin protective itong mga Democratic Party during this period, no? Okay, so where do we go now? So punta naman tayo sa may period of the 1970s. So the 1970s, dito nagkaroon ng emergence na tinatawag na Southern Strategy naman. So yung Southern Strategy is still related to how the Southern Democrats came to be, and of course how they left the party in opposition to civil rights, then they shift into the Republican Party nga. So yung Southern strategy, ito yung naging strategy ni President Nixon na kumbaga parang ginamit niya yung Southern resentment or ginamit niya yung white resentment to get the support of those white people who were against the black people. Kumbaga parang he believed that the white people were basically left with a lot of less opportunities, economic and political opportunities, at nabigyan ng better opportunities sa mga black Americans or parang na-left out na yung mga white Americans on that area. So, what Nixon did is nag-create siya ng voting block or nag-gather siya ng mga supporters from the southern part kasi nga si Nixon ay isang si Nixon ay isang Republican. So, yung mga victims of the freeing of the black people, yun yung mga ginather niya as his supporters. And it did created a huge gap between the Democrats and Republicans at that time. Okay? So, moving forward, we are now on the modern part of democracy, the 1990 up to the present. So, the modern democracy symbolizes basically globalization, even social diversity, and social reform. So, nag-start tong modern democracy in the administration of Bill Clinton. So, si Bill Clinton in the 1990s, he promoted what we call the third way. So, yung third way is basically a modernized social democracy between traditional liberalism. So, naging approach niya dito was to balance economic growth and social liberalism. Kumbaga, hindi niya gustong ma-left out yung social developments when it comes to ending slavery. At the same time, he wanted to emphasize yung empowerment of the blacks who have been long exploited by the whites in the South. And also, he empowered the, sabihin nating, priorities over social development programs like inclusivity and economic acceptance, and even in the aspect of protecting the laborers. So, ginamit niya tong third way to basically still balance or counterbalance the economic policies and social policies. So, yung economic aspects naman, Bill Clinton still empowered yung trade, free market trade mechanisms ng Amerika by engaging into other countries outside America or West. So, with that, parang na-win over niya yung vote ng mga ng mga Democratic supporters, which at this time it really dictated yung notion that many Americans really supported yung balance between economic growth and social liberalism. So in the 2008 to present, so punta tayo kay Obama naman, so 2008. So Barack Obama became the first black president or black American president of America. So since he was the first American president, by the way, naging administration niya is from 2008 to 2016. So, he emphasized yung tinatawag na Obamacare or yung healthcare reform niya na Affordable Care Act. Basically, this mandated or this institutionalized that private public institutions should give opportunity for Americans to afford healthcare in a very affordable manner. At the same time, access to healthcare for the minority, especially yung mga nasa working class kasi sila yung madalas na apektado ng mga health crisis. And syempre, it also gave better healthcare plans for Americans, meaning pwede nilang bayaran ng 10 installments or sabihin nating yearly payments or sabihin nating every 6 months. Ang whole point ni Barack Obama is that healthcare should be a priority that all Americans have a right to, no? Di niya naman ginawang free to everyone, but rather more of accessible and affordable. And also, Barack Obama empowered climate action through the UN Sustainable Development Framework, meaning he participated in many diplomatic agreements with other Western and non-Western countries, which led to America democratizing on the case of joining, let's say, a lot of reform-based conferences that would teach America to uh, conserve their energy, at the same time teach them how to eliminate or to disintegrate yung mga bad practices nila sa production in their factories. And of course, very important yung diversity, because um, Obama himself is a black individual, so he knows the struggles of how the black people came to be, lalo dun sa mga early 1700s up to 1800s. So he gave priorities to immigrants, particularly yung mga coming from Latin American states, to enter America and give them better economic and political opportunities. So in the recent years, of course, the modern democracy period has evolved not only up to Barack Obama, even in the time in where Joe Biden is seated, he focused on rebuilding alliances, of course, yung social infrastructure ng Amerika, and he defended democracy in the polarized America in where the Republicans are still trying to insist their dominance. So at present, now that um, Trump is seated, modern democracy is still practiced. We cannot deny that still US is a democratic country, but it wasn't as solid, as strengthened as it was before when, of course, Obama and Biden was seated. But in any political party or in any political ideology, there is always a bottleneck, or there are always imperfections attached to it. So we should not really romanticize, or let's not really sugarcoat democracy or the Democratic Party itself, because again, there are a lot of historical components to it that it wasn't really so much of accepting, it wasn't of inclusive, or it wasn't of welcoming as it is compared now. No? So moving forward, let us compare the Jeffersonian and Jacksonian democracy that was basically tackled here sa may first sa first period. So si Thomas Jefferson and Andrew Jackson are basically a good comparison of how democracy was different during the early times of America. So, sa part ni Thomas Jefferson, as mentioned earlier, he wasn't so much of supportive in removing the Black American slavery. So, si Thomas Jefferson, basically, he believed that a true republic, it depended yung virtue pati independence of its citizens. Particularly, he wanted to emphasize yung agrarian-based economy. So, yung agrarian-based economy, he wanted to make sure, or gusto niyang ma-eradicate yung mga dominance ng mga national banking, pati mga capitalist-centered corporations, because he believed that this hindered the rights, at the same time individual liberties of Americans at this time. So he believed, or Jackson believed, that small farmers should have their own land, or dapat meron silang control over their own land rather than the feudal lords. Okay? Jackson saw the ideal America as an agrarian society, no, made up of self-reliant individuals, free from the corruption and inequality that he believed accompanied industrialization and urban life. Okay? So si Thomas Jefferson, actually, he is seen to be an inspiration for many American presidents, particularly Manuel Quezon himself. He believed that Thomas Jefferson was right in the case of empowering our uh, small farmers, because they were largely controlled by the American corporations at that time. So, besides that, Jefferson believed that democracy should be guided by the educated and virtuous elite, meaning those capable of understanding yung responsibilities ng self-government. He did not completely disintegrated or not supported the elites, but rather he believed that there are elites that are still morally inclined, meaning political participation was therefore limited to mainly property owning white men. nakikita niya yung mga property owning white men na to as having the vested interest in maintaining liberty and stability. No? On the other hand, si uh, Andrew Jackson naman, who believed with his Jacksonian democracy, had a different view. So si Jacksonian democracy, it was dominant within 1820s to 1840s. Niredefine ni Jackson yung American political life by placing for greater faith in the common man. Yun na-mention natin common man kanina. Jackson and his supporters, naniwala sila that the ordinary white men were fully capable of participating in government and making political decisions. Unlike si Jefferson na nireserve niya yung leadership for the educated few. No, baliktad sila. Si Jackson or si Jacksonian democracy believed that all white males, take note, all white males, regardless of property or wealth, they have the right to vote and hold office. So kumbaga, mas sinuportahan ni Jackson yung equal opportunity for all. May it be he still reinforced racial and gender inequality. So even Jackson himself wasn't so much of supportive of freeing the black Americans from being slaves. Okay, so the concept of mass democracy, as mentioned, since meron na siyang support when it comes to meron na siyang support in having the equal democracy or political participation for all despite their social or political class. The Jacksonian democracy also gave rise to what we call a stronger presidency, meaning nakita ni Jackson na yung mga tao should be direct representatives of the people. Ginamit niya yung executive power to challenge the Congress, even entrenched elites. That's why he believed in the separation of powers. Inopose din ni Jackson yung tinatawag na monopolies and what we call the Second National Bank, na nakita niya to as an institution that favored the wealthy. Instead of giving equal opportunities, economic opportunities for all. Okay? So, moving forward, punta naman tayo sa may side ng Republican Party. So, sa side ng Republican Party, this is more of, sabihin nating, detailed or more of hefty in terms of how it developed. But if you are to ask me, I find the development of the Republican Party as something that's more of, surprising in a case because, again, as compared to the Democratic Party in where it started as a very white-centric or white-favoring political party. Ito naman si Republican Party, it was a very inclusive party to begin with. But it basically developed as something that is very American protectionist-centric as it is now in the present. So let's now start. So dito muna tayo sa may first phase. So similar to the development of the Democratic Party, I have divided it into 6 phases as well. So let's start first with the Ripon, Wisconsin phase of development of the Republican Party. So sa may Ripon, Wisconsin of 1854, this is where the founding of the Republican Party happened. So, sa may Ripon, Wisconsin, dito nagkaroon ng coalition of anti-slavery activists. Tinatawag sila ng mga Whigs pati free soilers or soilers. So, sa time na to, they were fighting for freeing the blacks from being slaves. So, it's a creation that was a direct response of the what we call the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. So, yung tinatawag na Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, this allowed the spread of slavery into new U.S. territories. Kumbaga, naging adamant or mas naging opposing si yung coalition ng mga Republicans at this time in the permitting of or legalizing of slavery at that time. So, sa southern states, mas naging rampant or mas naging common yung practice ng mga households pati ng mga institutions, may it be public or private, sa slavery. So, at this time that the Republican Party was established, it had a goal of creating a coalition that, again, besides diminishing slavery, it was more of creating it was more of creating a notion that the liberals were very supportive of the slavery in the southern states. And with that, it wasn't so much of a humanitarian response in the perspective of the Republican coalition. Next to that, we have the Abraham Lincoln period from 1856 to 1865. So this is where the Civil War and the birth of a national party emerged. So again, si Abraham Lincoln, uh, besides being first Republican president that was elected in 1860, he also led the nation in the American Civil War. Na-mention ko yan sa inyo before in our past lesson, no? So may American democracy. So when Abraham Lincoln led the American Civil War in 1861 to 1865, he basically aimed in freeing the black slaves from being slaves. So under his leadership, the party or the Republican Party preserved the Union. Kumbaga, they abolished still of black slavery and they redefined the American democracy that should be more of inclusive of all races. So yung mga naging achievements ni Abraham Lincoln during his time, besides stopping the spread of black slavery, he also created the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863. So kumbaga ito yung naging mechanizing act in where it freed enslaved people in Confederate states or yung mga slave states na tinatawag at that time. And also, besides the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863, next to that, nagkaroon siya ng 13th Amendment in the US Constitution. Ito yung actual na nag-abolish ng slavery across the whole US. So the Republican Party became the party of union, freedom, and even national unity. Okay? So let's now go to the Reconstruction and the Gilded Age from 1865 to 1900s. So the Reconstruction and the Gilded Age from 1865 to 1900s, it supported the expansion and industrial power, meaning, or it represented expansion and industrial power, meaning since Lincoln already diminished or eradicated the black slavery in America, it was just necessary or inevitable for America to also empower its technological and industrial mechanisms. So after the Civil War, Republicans led the Reconstruction era na tinatawag nga. So, meron tinatawag na radical Republicans na they aim to impose harsh penalties for the former Confederate states and the stronger protections for African Americans. And meron din naman tinatawag na moderate Republicans na favored a more lenient approach through due process. So, nahati yan sa dalawa. So, punta muna tayo dito sa may part in where the key policies at this time were empowered. So, the Reconstruction Amendment was basically implemented during this time. So, yung Reconstruction Amendment, it was implied in the 14th and 15th Amendments, which guaranteed citizenship and voting rights among the Americans, particularly even with the Black Americans. Besides that, tong Reconstruction era na to, it also led what we call the promotion of industrial growth, particularly sa technological advancements such as railroad expansion, even yung tariff protection, it was implemented at that time. So more of infrastructure and economic centered itong period na to. Okay? So in the late 19th century, nagkaroon na tinatawag na gilded age or yung post-Reconstruction era naman. Yung mga Republican Party placed itself to benefit from industrialists, mga big businesses, pati mga the wealthy. They saw Republican dominance in the elite community. Meaning, from dati na more of centered sila in ending segregation at the same time yung slavery in America, dito sa Gilded Age, mas naging centered sila in embodying the reconstruction of America into being more of business and industrialist centric. Kumbaga, mas naging embracing sila of the role of the elites in the community. So next to that, we have here the Theodore Roosevelt period. So in 1901, si Theodore Roosevelt, in this period, tinatawag yun na Progressive Republican period. So si Theodore Roosevelt, who became president from 1901 to 1909, tinransform niya yung tinransform niya yung Republican Party into a force of progressive reform. Meaning, he was far iconic compared to other Republican presidents of the US. He implemented reforms and policies such as trust building, or trust busting rather, breaking up monopolies, and lastly, the regulatory oversight of prices and businesses. So, yung naging landmark or naging trademark pala ni Theodore Roosevelt during his time is how he basically removed the monopolies of businesses in the business systems of America at that time. Kumbaga, mas naging decentralized yung market, pati yung institutions of America during his time. Besides that, he implemented a regulatory oversight of prices businesses. Kumbaga, yung pagmamonitor ng mga SRP or suggested retail price, siya yung nag-implement nito among the businesses in America. Okay? So, Theodore Roosevelt is a very progressive leader as the Republicans called him. So, meron siyang ginawang deal na tinatawag na square deal. Yung square deal na to, it provided fair treatment for workers, consumers, and businesses, meaning the square represents how all actors in the economic aspect of America were all independent in all areas or chambers. So, pagka pinabayaan ni Roosevelt yung mga consumers, it would also lead up to damaging the businesses. Or if Roosevelt were to not prioritize the workers, this would also lead up to consumers being affected. So with that, nag-establish si Roosevelt ng better economic policies in the aspect of business, labor, and consumer insights. So besides that, nagkaroon ng tinatawag na conservation movement sa time ni Theodore Roosevelt. So what the conservation movement entailed is that nagkaroon ng creation ng mga national parks, pati mga preservation ng mga natural resources na nag-maintain nung territorial at the same time environmental areas of America, no? So yung progressive stance ni Theodore Roosevelt, it has split the party when he formed the Progressive Bull Moose Party in 1912. Kumbaga yung mga dating radical pati radical Republicans pati moderate Republicans, mas nagkaroon ng larger distinction or ng gap between them. Okay? So next to that, we have the post-World War II, 1940s to 1960s period. So sa time na to, yan yung tinatawag na Cold War conservatism. So as you know, the Cold War, it is the division between the former Soviet Union, Russia, and of course the US hegemon at that time. So after the World War II, the Republican Party emerged as the voice of the conservative anti-communism. Sila din yung mga towards economic liberalism, pati limited government. So during the post-World War II, mas nagkaroon na ng clear identification or ng identity kung sino ba talaga ang mga Republicans. So again, they don't want the intervention of the communist, socialist, Soviet Union, which is now of course Russia. So yung mga presidents like Dwight Eisenhower as the 34th President of the US, nagkaroon siyang tinatawag na New Deal programs din. So ano bang inadvocate ni Eisenhower? So he represented a moderate Republican that basically balanced yung business growth pati social stability. So yung tinatawag na fiscal conservatism, ito yung parang pagiging limited government and market ng Amerika. But still, He wanted to empower America as going against the communist ideology. Ang idea niya ng established America was to embody the democratic and liberal ideologies among the people and going against communism. Okay? Ano bang ginawa ni Dwight Eisenhower? So during his time, sinuportahan niya yung tinatawag na North Atlantic Treaty Organization or NATO and yung containment ng communism. Kaya niya ginawa yung or kaya siya naging part or naging associated with NATO. It's to make sure na hindi na makakapasok or hindi na magkakaroon ng intervention ang communism inside the US through the Soviet Union or Russia. Because isa tong arms proliferation or security proliferation institution or organization that has, of course, positively affected the US in terms of its national security. Okay, so besides that, nagkaroon din si Eisenhower in the late 1960s na tinatawag na infrastructure development programs, like particularly the interstate highway system. So, dito nagkaroon ng better connectivity, infrastructure connectivity, yung mga states between the US, no? Lalo yung mga nasa urban centers. So, moving forward, punta na tayo sa Modern Republic, 2001 up to the present naman. So, in the Modern Republic era, which is focused on conservatism, populism, and division, dito na nagkaroon na ng solid identity si Republican Party, no? So, we never know. Pwedeng mag-evolve pa sa Democratic Party or Republican Party depending on their national interest or national climate. But at present, ang mga naging focus nila was more of traditional conservatism, even neo-conservatism, pati populism. So ngayon, ang mga naging highlight ng sabihin nating Modern Republic is of course, it started with George W. Bush of 2001 to 2009 na naging pushing point niya yung aftermath ng 9/11. Many conspiracies believe that the Al-Qaeda was related or commanded by George W. Bush to bomb the Twin Towers. Pero we never really had a solid evidence to that. So Bush launched what we call the War on Terror. Kumbaga, intervention to ng US military in the Middle Eastern states to basically attack and of course protect the US from the threats that was imposed by the terrorist groups of Middle East. Pero yung mga Afghanistan pati Iraq that was more of centered or mas naging target ng War on Terror, unfortunately, nagkaroon ng abuse of military power ang US dito. Because many war crimes was practiced by the US military. Maraming mga innocent population, including women, children, people of disabilities were butchered and at the same time involved during the attack of the US. And we cannot really sugarcoat that one, no? Besides that, the Modern Republic, particularly during the time of George W. Bush, it promoted compassionate conservatism and tax cuts. Kumbaga, since the Republicans didn't want higher taxes as compared to the Democrats, nagkaroon siya ng parang adjustment when it comes to the income of the Americans, particularly yung mga nasa corporate pati mga nasa healthcare system, because he believed that these people or this group of people in the worker population, they have sacrificed, they have contributed to the American society in a much greater space or scope. So, besides that, meron tayong tinatawag na intervention ng Barack Obama era opposition from the 2009 to 2016. Dito pumasok yung tinatawag na rise of the Tea Party movement from the 2010 particularly. So this demanded smaller government and lower taxes, in which the Republicans really pushed for, no? So in the Donald Trump era naman, moving forward, so 2016, 2021, and even up to the present, the rise of populism, particularly in Texas, in urban centers, even in the southern states. This is what Trump and the Republicans are really utilizing on in the present day Republican landscape, no? Yung tinatawag na America First policy or tinatawag na Make America Great Again or MAGA movement, these are the movements and policies that are basically representing of what the angle of Donald Trump want to use the Republican Party for. So besides that, Donald Trump redefined the party's base towards working class and rural voters kasi isa to sa mga tina-target niyang mga uh, voters for his party. It's the working class who are usually exploited by the over democratizing economy of the US, or sabihin natin yung mga white Americans who were deprived of better economic opportunities because of the intervention of the immigrants. So ito yung mga tina-target niya. And yung mga rural voters from Texas, Long Island, even in other rural states, ito yung mga gusto niyang i-prioritize over his policies because dyan siya malakas, even during his presidential elections. So, we have actually ended our lecture for today. I hope you have learned a lot from the developments of the Republican Party, developments of the Democratic Party. At the same time, how the other political parties also have their individual or sabihin natin distinct characteristics of political ideologies. At the same time, our comparison with the economic and social factors of how Americans tend to shape their political decisions, and of course, our example from the 1980 election between the Carter, at the same time the Reagan dichotomy happened, no? So on our next meeting, we will basically have an assessment showcasing or highlighting our lesson for today. So